All right, because I'm getting a lot of that lag and echo and frozen faces, which is a bit disconcerting because I'm thinking, am I just sitting here talking to myself?
That wouldn't stop you.
No, it wouldn't. Okay, well, in that, I'm getting occasional movement, so hopefully it'll pick back up again. So we'll persevere anyway. Maybe what I can suggest is there's also the chat box. So if you have anything to say, just in case, like you want to raise your hand and I can't see you or it's frozen or whatever, maybe just type something in the chat box as well, because hopefully that will come through. All right, without further ado, we will get started, and any late stragglers can join us as they come along. So in our series again of distilling wisdom from books for the purposes of creating your ideal life, we have the book by Brendon Burchard, this amazing book, The Motivation Manifesto. And we started last week on the first section, which was an introduction to the book, where he sets out some declarations, which is a little bit reminiscent of the American Declaration of Independence. I think that's where he's based some of his concept on. And so a manifesto is a series of declarations that all put together in a document. And in this case, it is his recommendation for the ideal way to live your life, or for him to live his ideal life. And so he sets out certain topics that he wants to make a declaration about. And then he gives a bit of a brief introduction to each topic. So that is why this section here is his declaration of personal power. And then as we go on, he then gives section 1, you get a breakdown of the key components of that. Stan's just joining us. Key components, which are a chapter on freedom, one on fear, and one on motivation. And then section 2 is the 9 declarations in a more expansive sort of explanation of each section and why he thinks that should be in the overall personal declaration. Good morning, Stan. Welcome aboard. Good to have you with us.
Morning, all.
Morning.
Okay. So last week we started with that initial declaration of personal power, the first introductory chapter, which there was some quite I want to say controversial, not controversial really, but sort of thought-provoking statements and explanations behind why each of those items should be in his declaration. And then we got as far as covering on freedom, the first chapter on freedom, which is in itself a very large chapter and very there's a lot to talk about in that one. So we didn't get as far as I thought we were going to get through these next 2 chapters as well, and I overestimated what I thought we could cover. So we'll go through the next 2 chapters today, which are the ones on fear and on motivation, if we get through those. So we'll aim to probably spend about half the meeting on each of what's left of the meeting. So first of all, just to get a bit of an idea, has everyone had a chance to read the section on fear?
Yes.
Just get maybe a show of hands of those who have read it. Yeah. No. Stan, Carly, did you get a chance? No, you still haven't got the copy of the book yet, I don't think. Okay, that's no problem, because we will go through the key points anyway, as I have done some highlighting, people. So the chapter on fear. And this was very interesting because fear is something that can attack all of us in its various forms and guises. And there's an opening statement, an opening quote here from Seneca, the philosopher: "He who is brave is free." So one of the things he starts off with, talking about fear ripping us from freedom. Fear is the big obstacle that we all face. And there's a variety of fears, you know, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of humiliation, fear of your own shadow, fear of all kinds of things. So one of the things he talks about here to start with is the self-oppressed, saying, well, you don't understand, I can't chase my dreams because what if I might fail? What if I'm not good enough? Has anyone at any time in their life ever felt that feeling of, hey, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, to be who I'm trying to be, or to achieve something I'm trying to achieve? I think it's just part of being human, isn't it? That we have those doubts that creep in. Now, some of that comes from the ego and its attempt to keep you safe. So as he goes on to explain, I mean, really the reason that part of our brain is there is to keep us safe, to stop us from physical threats like falling, being attacked by something or someone. Goes back to our caveman days, the fear of stepping outside the cave and being outside the tribe and on your own and at the mercy of rapacious dinosaurs or whatever else might be out there. There's still any dinosaurs out there today? I'm not sure, but certainly Australia, we've got just about the record number, I think, of things that want to kill you out in our bush here in our outback, with snakes and spiders and God knows what else, crocodiles and sharks and all sorts of things. Well, sharks are not in the bush, obviously, they're in the ocean, but there's a lot of things out there in Australia that want to kill you. So it is helpful to a certain degree to have fear come up now and again, but most of what we fear is in our everyday lives, just the things that come up in the business of going about our life and have nothing to do with real tangible physical threats. It might be fear of public speaking or fear of being embarrassed in the workplace. So he says in this, fear is the thief of humanity's light. I thought that was a very powerful statement. Declaring that we will master our fears is the first great leap towards freedom. So fears of things like being rejected, isolated, or abandoned, that's what we're really afraid of, not of being eaten alive, because really the chances of being eaten alive these days, well, I don't know about where you live, but where I live, there's not that many things that are going to eat me alive unless I sort of lie down on an anthill and cover myself in honey or something. But most of these are just social fears. And social fears, he says, can be overcome by willful practice. So when someone says, I'm fearful of public speaking, they do not mean they are worried someone in the audience is going to attack them physically. Well, I guess it depends on who the speaker is, but rather they mean they are afraid of failure. So when you get a fear, one of the key things that he recommends is to actually examine it and go, well, what is it that I'm really afraid of here? There's an apparent fear, but what's the real fear underlying that? So he talks about the cost of fear, and some of the people who have committed the worst atrocities of mankind have been people who really are themselves living in fear of being usurped, fear of losing their power. And as he says, those with power, it's the same story over and again, that they are so plagued by insecurity that rather than directing their strength to lift everyone up, they take comfort and pleasure in pushing down those who are unlike themselves, those they do not understand or value. And you see it in a workplace situation as well, don't you? I'm sure we've all come across the boss that tries to put everyone down in order to keep their position of authority, to make themselves feel like the bigger boss or the more powerful person. It's not a very pleasant work environment when you've got someone like that in charge of you, is it? So as he says, fear is the great usurper of progress and personal freedom. Certainly progress, because when you've got a boss like that, you don't want to contribute things, do you? Because you know you're going to get shot down in flames, or you get a boss that will take the credit for things and blame you for everything that goes wrong. Not much fun at all. Anyone had that experience before I go on? Yeah, a few people. All right. So he says this subchapter is called Aversion versus Ascension. So fear rules us only if we let it. This is a very powerful part of his personal life declaration. And I thought these examples were great because everything comes down to a choice. How else does the firefighter enter the inferno to save the people? Of course, the firefighter feels fear. Who wouldn't? Would you run into a burning building to save someone? You'd have to feel fear, wouldn't you, for your own safety? And yet these guys and ladies, I guess, go charging in and carry people out of burning buildings. How does the captain of a ship give the lifeboats to the others and go down with the ship or be the last person to get off the ship? How do the anxious still share their voice with the world? I love what V said last week, actually, that Brendon Burchard comes across to a certain degree as a sort of a preacher, because he's almost evangelical in some of the things that he says and the way he says it. And I love that style that he has, because he really paints a picture of like, for instance, people living in fear and the things that they're accepting. So in this case, really the key point is, he says that a great maturity opens in the human psyche when we accept that we can control our impulses by conditioning our thoughts, and that we alone are responsible for our emotions and reactions in life. And this has been quite a common theme of quite a few of the books that we've reviewed recently, is that it all starts with you taking a responsibility for where you're at in life, and that you've arrived at this point wherever you're at through the decisions that you've made, through what you've accepted, through what you've allowed yourself to be afraid of, or what you've bravely tackled. All of these little decisions have all added up to put you exactly where you are right now. So I'm sure, just to use one example that I know of here, is V's just made the big move down south, and that would have been a decision I'm sure that you must have had some concerns about or some possible fears about, and yet you've gone ahead and done it because you've perceived a better life that fits what the kind of lifestyle that you want to live. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes. Mind you, I think I went through, like, I guess I did go through pros and cons, but there didn't seem to be a lot of cons, and it just seemed to be a natural progression to move down. And I feel a bit strange when people call me brave, because it's like, it's just something that I needed to do. It just felt a natural progression. So I'd like to just comment, if I can, that
Sure.
I think there's a problem with fear in that also, before even overcoming it, you need to recognize it, because when we were reading Think and Grow Rich, was it Think and Grow Rich? Yeah, there's a whole chapter on fear, and it really struck me that some of the things that Napoleon Hill called fear is not what is behavior that we wouldn't actually probably consider fear, like procrastination is an act of fear. So I think it's important to actually acknowledge the fear. And also the example with the fireman, it's like, yes, he'll feel fear, but he has done so much training and he's got so much information about how to do it safely as possible. And I think that's a great tip on how to overcome fear, is to actually arm yourself with knowledge.
Yes, very much so. Good point. Well, it's the same with all kinds of training for emergencies. When I was learning to fly, for instance, got my pilot's license, that the repetitious nature of the training is that you are taken through checklists of things to do in the event of an engine failure, for example, how you're going to put that plane down in a field, and you go through the processes so many times in a simulated way that you know that when it actually comes to the reality, you hope then that training kicks in and you instinctively do what your training has led you to do. But it is through repetition. It's through doing the thing. Another great book on this actually is Susan Jeffers' book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. If you haven't read that one, that's definitely one we could review as well. But it is that the fear itself doesn't necessarily disappear. We acknowledge the fear that it's there, but we see it for what it is, and then we take the action anyway, despite the fear. Not necessarily the fear doesn't go away, it's still there, but you just put it in a box and go, right, there's the fear, that's okay, that's there to keep me safe, I understand that, but I'm going to do this anyway. So it is a choice, and in doing those, every time, Tony Robbins talks a lot about this, every time that you make that decision, you add a little bit more personal power to your psychology, to your own psyche. Every time you do something that you weren't sure you could do, and you do it anyway, and even though you feel uncomfortable, you step outside your comfort zone, you add a little bit extra to it's like an investment in your own bank account of personal belief, self-belief. Because the more you've tackled one thing, the more you can think, well, I can tackle whatever else life throws at me. Wendy, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking about, when did I feel really fear that I had to do something, and if I didn't do it, I wouldn't progress personally. And when my husband and I started our business, I was like 25, and we just decided we were going to start a mailing house. So that's a whole other story. But somebody had to get on the phone and introduce our business. And at the time, 30 years ago, you did it by phone. You telemarketed and you called people up to tell them about yourself, or you did mailings and such. But still, the best way is just to get on the phone and say, hey. And I had never done that. I've never talked on the phone. I was incredibly shy. I never spoke in public, even in family gatherings. So I had to go and do that. And it took a very long time and practice. And after I would get off the phone, my husband was with me because he was running the nailing part. So we would talk about how the conversation went, what I could say better. And I kept doing it day after day after day until they came naturally. But I still never public spoke until about 5 years ago, where I attended a meeting, and my person that I talked to was at the postal convention, knew me, and we had great conversations. And she's like, I know who knows all about that. Wendy, why don't you get up and talk about it? And that was my first. I went up there and I did it. And I think doing that led me to feel I could go on Zoom meetings.
Yeah, so it's just well, thanks for sharing that. It is a series of stepping stones, isn't it? Once you do one thing, you think, well, if I can do that, maybe I can do the next thing. And that is how we add that little bit extra confidence each time. And then suddenly we find ourselves confronted by something that's another step further, and we think, well, I've come this far, I can do it again. So that's a good segue into the next point, which is the social conditioning of fear. He says, we are not slave to our history. We can be freed by our conscious thoughts and disciplined habits. So a lot of where the fear comes from is from our past experiences, from where we've perhaps been embarrassed before, or we've been thwarted in our efforts to do something and made to feel perhaps that we weren't good enough to do it. And those memories will pop into our brain, even perhaps on a subconscious level, to say, oh, hang on, you didn't do this successfully before. You're probably not going to be good enough to do this now. And he says the good news is we can change this conditioning. When we awaken to responsibility, we realize that nothing can be done about our past, but to see it from a new perspective. I love that. We can release ourselves from its grip by putting it in a perspective, by just reframing it, as we say in NLP, by considering, well, yeah, maybe I couldn't do it then because I was too young or too short, or I was a little kid then, but now I'm an adult. I wouldn't feel brave enough to stand up in front of the school assembly and talk when I was a kid, but now as an adult I can do this. So we can free ourselves from those memories and from things that might have held us back through conscious choice. He then goes on to talk about how we can allow other people's fears to encroach upon us. So people who worry, or people, I love this comment, let us beware the saboteur of dreams cloaked in the good-willed friend. So how many times do family or friends with the best of intentions say, oh, I don't know, are you sure you can do that? You know, does that seem like you? And when you again look at that, where it's coming from a position of them caring about you, them not wanting you to fail and feel all the feelings that go with that of rejection and shame and embarrassment and all those sorts of things. So they're trying to protect you, but really a lot of the time they're extending their fears onto you. Oh, I wouldn't be doing that. Yeah, well, okay, you wouldn't, but I am. So it's quite normal for these things to come up. So he says we must forgive their small thinking and we must look beyond it to see a vaster horizon for ourselves. Let us obsess about freedom, not fear. So he's very much looking at it as a black or white thing. You're either living in freedom or you're living in fear. Which one are you going to allow to win? Which reminded me of the American Indian talking to his son, and he's telling him about the two wolves. Everyone heard that story? The one wolf is the one that makes you that you're afraid of, and the other wolf is the good wolf. And he's like, which one shall, or which one's going to win? He says, whichever one you feed. So yeah, we can feed the fear, or we can feed the feeling of freedom, the feeling that we can do things. So that old thing about birds of a feather flocking together, we must be discerning with those we know well and allow close. It is possible to listen lovingly while being careful about what energy we absorb. And also this is quite a bold statement too. We mustn't take these loiterers on the sidelines for friends. So, wow, loiterers on the sidelines. I thought that was pretty good. Let us choose the strenuous life, taking pride and finding honor in our struggles and our contributions. We will not fear the exhaustion and anxieties that magnificent dreams and unceasing hard work can bring. We will keep a joyous heart even as we toil, for our toils bring us toward that which we find meaningful. So he very much talks about the fact that we know that with progress, there is often struggle. In order to progress, we have to either learn new things or step outside our comfort zones, or just become bold at having a go at things. And that comes with any progress. There is always struggle. And you think about it in our human lives, even just coming out of the womb is a struggle, isn't it? Just being born, just talk about growing pains as you're going through childhood. And so when you think about it, all through your life, there's been struggle or obstacles or things you have to overcome to get to the next thing, whatever the next thing is. And that's not going to change. That's going to go on through our life. So by seeing it for what it is, putting it in a different frame, different perspective, it makes it less of a thing to be feared and more of an acknowledgement of something that we're just going to have to go through. If we want to stand up and do public speaking for the first time, we're going to have to be willing to feel uncomfortable the first time we do it. But once you've done it, it's never as bad as you imagined it was going to be, is it? Well, not unless you make a complete hash of it. And you might reinforce the belief that it's something you can't do. But if other people can do it, surely it's just a matter of getting the training. Surely it's just a matter of figuring out, like V said, what are the steps that you need to learn? What are the processes? What's the training that you need to progress? And allowing other people recognizing that other people may have those limits, may have those fears, doesn't mean we have to. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily bad people either. It just means they've got their own journey to go on. So he says, and even people who try to pull you down to their level, they're doing that from fear. So he says, we mustn't wish them ill. It's not worth the energy, and wicked people will get what they deserve as they destroy themselves. Our success lies not in their destruction, but in our own advancement, not in the astonishment on their faces as we surge past them, but in the joy in our hearts at having prevailed despite them. There's an old saying that success is revenge, but do you need to take revenge? No, you just need to be the best version of yourself that you can be. I know it sounds a little bit cliched and corny to sort of say that, but really, it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing, because that's their journey. And who are we to judge anyway? If we can just add some light and add some inspiration to other people, that's great. But if they're not ready to receive it, then they've got their own journey to go on. I found this interesting, that we must remember, well, he says, no matter how many bores and bastards we meet in life, we must remember that we have friends all around, and we mustn't hesitate to ask for their help, inspiration, and wisdom. Why do we hesitate? Maybe that could be fear of being rejected, or fear of putting ourselves out there and saying, I'm trying to achieve something here. Can I get your help? How many times in our lives do we hold off or think, oh no, I don't want to ask for that person's help? That's another great thing that we're being taught in these books, is about the power of leverage and the power of collaboration. When we work together, we can achieve more than we can separately. And if someone can teach you something that's a skill set that you need to move forwards, then why would you not take that? Why would you not accept it? So yes, V says not asking for help seems to be another fear. It is, isn't it? Yeah, Carly.
I find I don't always ask for help, because if I don't have the money exchange to give the person and that's all they're interested in, then I don't ask for help from that person, because I'm not able to meet their requirement, if that makes sense. So you could put that in a fear basket, but it's more a value exchange for me that has a collaboration essence to it, from my heart to your heart. And so not everyone is willing to meet that collaboration essence that I hold as a very integral value in my integrity system.
So are you saying that you find it easy to help other people, but other people might be afraid to ask you for fear that you're going to ask for something in return that they can't deliver?
No, I'm saying that when I need collaboration with people, other people that I would love to collaborate with needs a money exchange. They won't just exchange my services as an energetic healer, where I could help them expand in an area, unless there's a money exchange. And when I don't have that money exchange,
yeah,
it doesn't always work out, because I have a different integrity system to their style of being.
yes,
back to energy.
So people, especially in our society, we've been conditioned that if we receive help from somebody, we feel obligated to do something in return, whether it's to pay them or to do some other act in exchange for what they've given us. So we actually feel uncomfortable receiving. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm happy to receive, but my thing is people don't seem to want to exchange in that way. They seem to more want the money side of the exchange.
That's what I mean, because they feel uncomfortable
at
receiving your gift without offering you something in return.
Yeah, so you're saying it that way. Okay.
Yeah,
so
because it's people are suspicious, or or feel embarrassed that, but if you've given me something and I don't give you something back, I'm not being fair to you. And then they feel like they're indebted to you in some way.
Yeah, but what if they actually did service somewhere else and the universe is paying them back that way?
Absolutely. I had a great example of that many years ago when I went to buy a whole bunch of, well, a pile of wood to build a pergola at my first house. And so I had this trailer load of timber. I mean, talking, big timber fence, like, or posts, supporting posts that were going to support this pergola. So there's quite a lot of weight in these pieces of timber. And I was driving down the road and inexperienced at using a trailer, and went over a bump or something, and my trailer started jackknifing, and next thing is it swung right round and tipped the load out basically onto the road. And I obviously had to stop, and then I was like, well, how am I going to, I've obviously got too much weight on this trailer. It had been loaded by the guys at the hardware place, not by me, and it had been loaded incorrectly, so the weight was not properly distributed. But I'm suddenly there with this pile of timber that I've just paid a lot of money for all over the road, and a guy stopped to help me, and we stacked it on the side of the road, and we put half of it back on the trailer and split the load in two, and said, take that lot home and then come back for the rest of it. It should still be here when you get back. But I was like, oh, can I give you some money or buy you a drink or something for helping me? And he's like, no, that's fine. Just pay it forward. Next time you see someone else that needs help, you help them. And I thought, what a great philosophy. And that memory stuck with me.
I love that, because the universe is law of supply and it's always paying it forward. For, like, in your service, there's always a forward movement.
Yeah. And my wife's had that experience in certainly where we live in the hills here. It's a very, very community oriented sort of area. Being in the supermarket one day and getting to the checkout and realizing she'd left her card in her other purse that was back at home, and she's going through checkout and suddenly can't pay the bill, and says to the checkout lady, put that to one side, I'll just have to nip home and get my card and I'll come back and pay you. And as she's walking to her car, this child comes running out behind and says, oh, excuse me, miss, my mum's just paid for your shopping. And so her whole grocery bill got paid by this lady who was behind her in the queue. And since then, Joe's paid that forward to a couple of other people as well, where she's paid somebody else's bill that's been stuck in the queue and suddenly realized they haven't got enough money, or they've left their purse at home, or whatever it is. So it is a great way of looking at it. So thanks for bringing that up, Carly, because it doesn't necessarily have to be an exact exchange at that exact moment. It can be a spiritual thing where you just pay it forwards. Very good point. All right. So he says, most of the fear we feel in life is simply anxiety arising from our anticipation of two kinds of pain that change might bring: the pain associated with loss or hardship. So there's a worry or a thought pattern that we fear we're going to lose something. If we change jobs, we're worried about losing the wages or compensation or bonuses or something, or the friends that we have with certain co-workers. And if we go somewhere else, is it going to be the same when we go to the next place? Great point here. If I go on a new diet, I'm afraid I'll lose the joy I feel in eating my favorite foods. A smoker might say, if I quit smoking, I'll lose that 20 minutes of peace I get by going outside and taking those long drags and chatting with people outside. So I'm afraid to quit. That's an interesting one, isn't it? That people, it's all everything that we associate. Like Tony Robbins says, it's nothing has meaning except the meaning that we assign to it. So how many times you hear the story of the girl that's maybe getting abused by the partner, and it's like, I don't want to leave him because if I do, what if I don't find anyone else? So they'll carry on even taking a beating rather than the risk being alone, because that seems more a terrifying prospect to them. Carly, what do you mean lemon meringue pie? I've just seen your comment in the chat.
You were talking about if we dieted and we miss out on our favorite food. And lemon meringue pie is delicious. The homemade old-fashioned one I'm talking.
Sorry, I didn't see that quickly enough. So I was like, what? Oh, that's funny. All right. So we've got Yanni joining us as well. Great to have you with us. And we lost Yanni halfway through the call last week. So hopefully you can stay there and still maybe even contribute. I don't know if you were driving or you're able to contribute anything.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, just that I've been working so much, so at least I catch the last.
Okay, no worries. Well, good to have you with us. So we're just talking about some of the assumptions that we make that cause us anxiety. So we should explore the opposite of our worries, focusing as obsessively as possible on what might be gained if we change. So it's normal that when we think about a change, that we will have those feelings of, well, what if I lose this? What if this isn't the same? But what about what we gain? So when we get, what he's really saying is recognize it. When you get that feeling coming up, oh, but what if I lose this? What if that is not going to be the same if I change and do this thing instead? Yeah, but what about what you gain? And if you focus more on what you gain, then you're more likely to carry on and do the thing that you're fearing or that you're anxious about. So he says, isn't a better life worth some struggle? Generally, things are not just black and white, are they? They come in packages. It's like if you vote for one political party, you might not agree with everything that they do, their entire manifesto of policies, but you agree with most of what they do. But then you have to sort of accept that there's compromise. So it's the same with everything in life, isn't it? That there's always a lot of good points about the thing you want to change, that you want to improve, but there's also one or two things that are not so good that usually come with it, and that sort of tends to be the case. Then we've got to decide, well, what's the overall benefit? Is it worth a few inconveniences or a few struggles to get this better situation that I'm looking for? He says, if we take a moment to contemplate, we can realize that we have learned and endured more difficult things in the past, and we can learn and endure whatever is needed now. The tools to manage the difficulties of life are within. It all comes back to this. Whatever is going on between your ears and in your heart is usually the key thing that makes the difference, isn't it? It's we can learn and we can grow, and we must begin now because destiny favors the bold. Maturity comes in understanding that it is our choice alone to move towards freedom. And practice, as was said earlier, the key thing there. We can choose the courage to put ourselves in the vicinity of the things we fear over and over again until we grow more comfortable and then confident. And the concluding part of this chapter, fear wins or freedom wins. And I choose freedom. Yay! Who's willing to choose freedom? Very good. Excellent. Well, on motivation, chapter 3. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Great quote, isn't it? We've had that sort of thing come up again in a few of the other books that we've reviewed. If you were to ask a bricklayer, what are you building there? And one just says, I'm building a wall. And you ask the next one and he says, I'm building a hospital. It's what's the vision that you have in what you're doing is where your motivation comes from, really, isn't it? It's through the pursuit of personal freedom, we discover our destiny. Through fear, we look at our demise. What do you, like you said, Tony Robbins said, the meaning that we assign to it, if you believe in something in a greater vision of what you're trying to achieve, then you immediately feel more motivated. exactly the thing we had in the infinite game with Simon Sinek. Having that, or start with why, having that strong why, that strong reason as to why you want to do something, instantly adds extra motivation to the equation. Because without that why, you're just building the wall rather than the hospital, and the wall doesn't seem that important. But building a hospital seems much more important, doesn't it? It means you're doing something for the community. You can see benefits for other people. You're contributing. All those positive feelings that come with that are all in relation to the size of your vision, or the power of your reason why. So he says our first step is to understand motivation's root. Motive, which means a reason for action. It's the why we do something. The mother of motivation is choice. Our mind chose a reason for action, and it is either committed to that choice or it didn't, or we didn't commit to it. So how many times do you hear of people making choices? I'm sure we've all done it. Making a choice, especially New Year seems to be a time when everyone does that, the old resolutions. Yep, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, read a book a day, or I'm going to do a 30-minute walk every day, or stop eating chocolate cake, or give up smoking, whatever it is that people do or say they're going to do. Are they actually committed to it, or was it just a wish? A big difference between the two. A hallmark of those who achieve greatness is the discovery that they can control the level of motivation they feel by better directing their own minds. And there's the rub, as Shakespeare would say. A lot of the time people, they want the result, but they don't really focus on what it's going to take to get that result, and how they're going to, like with James Clear, put the right systems in place in order to change the habits required. So it's a whole combination of things, isn't it? It's getting clear about the reason why. What is the meaning behind this action that you want to take? If it's to give up smoking, what are the health benefits? How are you going to feel? How are your clothes going to smell? How are you going to be able to walk up that flight of stairs without feeling out of breath? You're going to live longer. All the reasons that you want to do it, you need to pile those on and keep reminding yourself of those benefits. And he says, I think, therefore I am, and I do. Motivated people seize this truth. The great artists, leaders, and innovators use the entire force of their reasoning faculties to become their highest selves and do the highest good. They express who they truly are and pursue goals they find meaningful. So it really is about this meaning, isn't it? Whatever meaning we assign to it. People, this is in orange, people, this is an important one. So people who are motivated are not lucky, they are conscientious. They choose to use their minds in a more purposeful way in order to energize and lift their lives. And for that, they tend to achieve more and gain more respect. Has anyone here ever felt jealous of somebody else and their achievements? Well, we're all human, aren't we? Isn't it easy to say, oh, well, it's all right for them. They must have, well, their parents were wealthy, or, oh yeah, it's all right for her. She's beautiful, or all those sorts of things that come into our minds as excuses for why we can't do it, or why we can't be what they are or achieve what they have. And it all comes down to the way we think, and they in some way have harnessed the power of their mind to make the right decisions, to overcome the fears, to do the work, to go through the struggle. And we can so easily dismiss all that as, oh yeah, but it's all right for them. It's all in our minds, and we have the power to change that. So he says happiness is a result of thought, not impulse. So if we want more motivation in our lives, we must make clearer choices and more deeply commit to them. Another key point that seems to keep on coming back up is, if we don't allocate the time to think through what it is we really want and get clear about it, what are we sending out to the universe? And I'm talking sort of spiritually here, that when we don't know what we want, how's the universe going to give it to us? How can we attract what we want if we don't know what we want? We're just going to get a mixture of stuff thrown at us until we figure it out. But think through your own life, the times when you've figured out something that you really want and you've gone for it, you've put your focus and your attention on it, you've put your energy in that direction, then suddenly the results start to come, don't they? Suddenly the universe gives you what it puts people in front of you and opportunities in front of you that you're meant to have. Maybe they were there all along, you just didn't see them because you weren't really looking. You weren't really clear about what it was you wanted. Anyone got any thoughts on that? I see we have a couple in the chat box there. V, did you want to read out what you said there and elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, you were talking about well, everybody and their mothers are in love with an end result, but that is not what produces the end result. It's being in love with a process. So if you're looking at the tasks in front of you and going, it's all too hard, then there's no way of reaching that goal. So you need to actually realize that the goal or your motivation, your why is so big and so powerful that the struggle becomes easy.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, when you're in flow and really when I'm in flow, I mean, Nana took a year to get here, but it was a big goal and it was a struggle, but it didn't feel like a struggle. It was just something that needed to happen. It was just steps to take.
And what was the greater meaning behind that?
The greater meaning behind
The move. What was you saw? You must have seen. It must be a clear meaning for you as to how it's going to improve your life to make that move.
Yeah. It was the lifestyle, being in touch with nature, being closer to people that I'm feeling more aligned with. And yeah, I just felt that there is something that's going to happen for me here that can't happen anywhere else. This is where it's going to happen.
So those feelings of what you were going to gain made any sort of struggle involved or any fear involved just disappear or seem
Yes.
insignificant. Like you said before, it became, you didn't even see yourself as brave. You just went, I'm just doing this. So I've already committed to it.
It's just steps. It just became steps that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Just one foot in front of the other.
Absolutely. Wendy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was kind of pondering on the jealousy. Was I ever jealous of everybody? But I wasn't ever really jealous. I always felt that it was unfair, that some people had better advantages and that I had to start a little bit further back. So I guess it's a form of jealousy. And throughout my life, I was always trying to survive. And in that survival mode, like you said, you don't take time to quiet your mind to see, why am I surviving? And my latest journey has been from survive to thrive, enjoy life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a Maserati. It could just be in a nice car. And I can still go to the same beach and I still can enjoy the ocean or the park, but I can then go to work and I don't have to be a workaholic. I should just go there and do what I like to do and grow my business. So over time, what's happening is I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just doing it a different way and enjoying. I'm saying, yeah, it's a struggle, but I'm enjoying the struggle. It's like, because I can see what the outcome's going to be. It's not a struggle to a dead end and a mystery. It's a struggle to a point of projection that I'm going to. I can see the end. So there's a joy in that. So I'm happy in it. And like you said, happy is a thought, and that keeps you motivated. And this is just, I'm starting to learn this. And I'm not perfect. I fall to the wayside. I get tired, grumpy, and other adjectives. But but I'm at a point now that I see it and I stop sooner and I enjoy what I'm doing. So that is creating the motivation that I need to continue. Like when I come to this meeting, make sure I read the book and get through it and understand it, because I know the end is going to be a collaboration.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Wendy. And Jim Rohn put it really well when he said that personal development is like bathing. I think it was Jim Rohn. That it's not just something you do once, you know, it's something you have to keep on doing because we are all human and we all do, even when we think we've got it all figured out and we've read all these books and we're moving forwards, and we still get hit with the same feelings. We still have the same challenges, and we still need to keep reminding ourselves of, oh, there's that fear, or there's that feeling. That's okay, that's normal. I'm still going to act anyway. And gratitude is a big part of that, you know, it's okay to be grateful for what you have and still want more. The two are not mutually exclusive. You can still want to improve and yet still be grateful for where you're at. And that's our ongoing journey. Carly, you got your hand up again.
I'll put it back down if you want. I just love what Wendy's saying, because straight away she mentioned enjoyment after that first little statement of surviving. And basically every moment we enjoy is thriving, even if it looks shit in the process, because there's joy somewhere in the process, because there is an outcome that your heart's desiring, even in the experience. So just the whole enjoyment piece and the joyful steps, like when Veronica was aiming for that farm, and I'm not speaking on her behalf, this is how I'm feeling it. She's aiming for that farm or that lifestyle in Nana because it is the kind of people she wants to hang out with. It is the passion of the horses and close to that energy of horses. Like she's half an hour away or whatever it is from the place. This is my example because I'm not sure if it is half an hour. But she's closer to the energy of her purpose. My God, that's the joy. All the rest is just little pieces that look like it's part of the puzzle, looks like it's negative and positive, and I've got to attach myself to this big vivacious goal, but it's actually the purpose of you being your true essence, that essence and energy that you mentioned earlier. And Veronica is so close to that she's almost awakened through that, even living half an hour away from that and driving to that every day on her journey of her enjoyment.
Yep.
So the day she leaves the earth, that's all that will matter.
Yeah, and even when you're struggling, you know, when you look back at that struggle, it might be tough at the time, but then you realize, well, I had to go through that struggle to get to the next thing. And so there's a joy in realizing that you came through it, that you achieved it, or you survived it, or you endured.
Yeah, you're one more step closer to your true essence, fully owned and embodied and valued. Like the true essence of joy is in every moment, but we miss those moments while we're stressing about getting over here and being richer, stressing about being over here and being our purpose and help 100,000 people, stressing about just paying the electricity bill, stressing about what we're going to eat today, which is a big stress. But when we're in our joy, the man with your trailer and the wood turned up.
Yeah.
And there's so much joy in the collaboration, which is what Wendy also touched on, the collaboration.
Yes. All right. So just being aware of time, moving along quickly, I'll just pick out some of the key points that I've highlighted in orange, particularly. Psychologically, motivation is sparked by the energy created by ambition and expectancy. And by deeply contemplating higher aims, we energize ourselves to pursue them. So this thing about expectancy, quite often, the thing that holds us back is a lack of self-belief. We might want something, we might think, oh, that would be great to have that. We can see all the benefits, but we doubt our own abilities to carry it through. And so, again, it's about focusing our minds on seeing us achieving these things, rather than focusing on all the things that could go wrong, or the things that, you know, that would make us fail. So the old tools that keep coming up, journaling, thinking about it, creative visualization, seeing ourselves make it happen. You don't win a gold medal by seeing yourself tripping and falling halfway down or stumbling out of the starting blocks, do you? You see yourself crossing that finish line and having the gold medal put around your neck. That's the difference. And the person who focuses on the stumbling and falling probably will stumble and fall because they've attracted it. So it's so easy to fall into that bad habit of seeing all the negatives. If we can imagine ourselves doing great things with boldness and fire and commitment, this is visualization and internalization, a process of weaving expectancy deep into our psyche and the fabric of our being. This is the process of sparking our own motivation. And the other thing, this is again a Napoleon Hill theme, what he calls drifters. You know, the real downfall for many people isn't that they are unmotivated people, but they are simply distracted. How many of us are distracted by all the stuff that we deal with in our day-to-day lives? Like you said, paying the bills, or dealing with staff problems, or you know, fixing the fence, or whatever it is that you need to get done. And all those things can get in the way of you really focusing on what you really want out of life. We have to do all this stuff. We will have to deal with stuff that we don't necessarily want to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I love this. We mustn't let our dreams die in the daylight because we lose focus while responding to the world's lame interests or false emergencies. False emergencies, don't we get a few of those in life? We're becoming obsessed with a mighty aim. So some might fear that we're cultivating an obsession, or, you know, you have that oh, a cult. Oh, there must be an occult. They're so motivated, it doesn't seem real, you know, they're in a cult. Well, we're becoming obsessed with a mighty aim, putting our full attention and zeal, perhaps for the first time, in something that truly matters to us. What is the ultimate secret to lifelong motivation? Continuing on no matter what. And let it be clear to all, greatness belongs to those who have mastered the ability to focus relentlessly on their ambitions and act decisively towards them. Again, it's about attitude, enthusiasm. Free and motivated people are positive and enthusiastic about their goals and their lives. And creating the right social environment, coming on meetings like this with like-minded people, is what fuels that motivation, what reminds us that we're not the only one going through struggles. Other people are figuring stuff out as well. And it's a daily process. And feeding yourself positive motivational material is going to help add to that library you've got in your head of all the reasons why you can do things, and that you've achieved stuff before, and you've proven in your own mind that whatever you really set your mind to, you can achieve. Our environment matters, and so we shall shape it to lift us into the next realm of motivation and joy. There's that word joy again, because the joy is in the decision to do it and the following through of doing it and the overcoming the obstacles. There's the joy in the achievement, in knowing that we did it despite the fears, despite the obstacles. That pretty much brings us to the end of that chapter. Anyone want to add any thoughts to that? Anything that's occurred to you this morning as a result of going through this? Wendy? Are you muted, Wendy? Yeah.
Yeah, I just fixed it. I always look at the obstacles as part of the stuff that makes it interesting and a little bit more fun, because a smooth road might not be so much fun, but when you go over the hurdles and you meet the challenges, it's so much more tasty when you meet the goal. That's like Holly likes lemon meringue pie, but she said homemade, because it's better, not because maybe it's physically better, but there's heart and love in a homemade lemon meringue pie. Makes it taste better because you went through the obstacles of making it, as opposed to driving up to the corner store and buying it. It may taste the same, but there's something special about it because it's yours. And it has different ingredients, true. And sometimes the way people paint or create or have business has different ingredients. And that's their challenges, and that's what makes it interesting in the end.
Yep. Very good. And also with the point that Carly's alluded to in the chat box as well. For instance, going back to Joe in the shopping center, it wasn't the individual ingredients or the items in her shopping list that made the experience what it was. It was the fact that a complete stranger had come up and said, I'll pay for your shopping, not knowing anything about her, just wanting to do something out of the goodness of their heart to help another human being in their community. And so it's not necessarily the individual things or the individual components of the situation, it's the feelings that come with that. So the feelings of, hey, a complete stranger cared enough to do that for me, and that has a knock-on effect. It's a ripple effect that we can all help create when you do something unconditionally. It's basically unconditional love for humanity. When you put that forward, it gets paid forward. And I suppose we have to trust that karma will look after us as well at some point, but we shouldn't rely on that. We should give unconditionally. There's no expectation that it will come back to us, but just a knowing that it will in our hearts. Carly, did you want to add anything to that?
I was going to say there's nothing to know in our hearts. We just follow the joy.
Yes. Yeah. And be present in the joy as well in this moment, and be present to the joy in the struggle, because it's in the overcoming the obstacles that we grow the most. So at the time it's frustrating because none of us want to go through the struggle at the time, but if we can accept it for what it is, and as he said, reframe it or give it a different perspective, we can, again, when we look back on it, if we can see ourselves having already achieved and looking back on the struggle, what do you call it, future pacing in NLP terms, is seeing yourself having already achieved it and knowing that that struggle was worth the effort because you're going to achieve the end result. So powerful stuff, isn't it? That we can draw on that motivation. Yeah, Carly.
I love this conversation around this because in my other book class that I'm doing shortly, we discussed doing 30 days of self-appreciation, where you just write down one appreciation or one value of yourself or an experience of appreciation of something, and then you add them up each day, write another one to the list, and over 30 days you've got 30, but each day as it builds, read them back to yourself. And just the joy in that, because all that is an appreciation of your joyful value, recognized and accepted and owned and appreciated by you, and the rest gets taken care of. the universe's law of supply, and just like Jo received, because I know how joyful she is in her participation in life, with people, herself, with family, with everything. And to me, that was a great representation of Jo, with no expectation, just being her amazing, joyful service to the world by being. And she got so many gifts given back to her without even needing to worry about how or asking for help or anything.
And what's interesting about that too is that I can actually remember where Jo had done that for other people previously that she might have even forgotten about. So it was actually karma. It did come back to her from, I remember her being at the hospital one time to go and collect some medication for my stepson. And there was a lady and they were waiting for ages for this medication. Another lady who'd come a long distance and was waiting in the waiting room. And Jo just said, can I buy you a coffee or something, you know, and took her out, took this lady out and bought her a coffee. The lady didn't have any money on her. She had just enough to pay for a medication. And Jo's like, that's all right, I'll get that for you. So she's done things like that in the past and not even thought anything of it, forgotten all about it. But then when it, you know, it comes back to you, maybe in ways you're not expecting or at times you're not expecting it to.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Tony. Thanks for today.
Another good little tip on that theme, Carly, you might want to try, people, is a gratitude jar. So you actually get a little piece of paper and write down one thing that you're grateful for today, and then fold up the bit of paper and drop it in the jar. And you do that for a year. And I've done it in the past. And I'll tell you what, when you open that jar and you read all the things you were grateful for through that year, it's quite amazing. You will see some of them come up repetitively. You know, you're grateful for your dog or your cat or whatever it is, or your wife or your husband. But you'll see lots of other things that will put a smile on your face that you'll have even forgotten about that you were grateful for through that year. It's a great little exercise to do as well. So one to remember. So thank you everyone for your contributions today. We will go on to the next 2 chapters next week. I think probably 2 chapters is a reasonable chunk at a time. So we're heading into the declarations, the 9 declarations. So the first one for next week is we shall meet life with full presence and power, following on nicely from what we've been talking about today. And we shall reclaim our agenda. So we'll work on those 2 for next week. Anyone else got any last thoughts or things they'd like to add?
I was just writing in the chat, it keeps all of that gratitude notes and all that keeps you aware to the presence and power of now. And then you said next week's chapter is the presence and power of now. And I thought I was just typing that.
There you go. Well, we're obviously tuned in then, aren't we? All right. Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome week wherever you are. And we'll see you same time next week.